My students, those who have worked with me, know that I often say art is about relationships, relationships within a composition, and relationships among artists, and among people, that art is about communication. Our Prescott visiting artist, Riley Brewster, is a friend since childhood, and our friendship was about imagination, creating a world, and through the years, the child within has grown through art and through painting. Riley's work has always seemed to me to be about places, memories, contemplation, and being. So Riley is a graduate of Bowdoin College and Yale School of Art. He has taught at Washington University, Yale University, Bowdoin College, Hampshire College, New York Studio School, Dartmouth College, and is currently teaching at Western Connecticut State University, where he's been since 2006. He's a recipient of many awards, which you can see on the email. I won't read all of them, and also many numerous one-person shows. And you can hear him talk about his work on the Gorky's Granddaughter link that I sent. And this year, there was a book published about Riley called Fields. And it was forwarded by Matt Murphy, and there's an introduction by Stephen Cabasa. In addition to the places I mentioned, Riley also studied at St. Martin's School of Art in London and at the New York Studio School. Riley's work has, and his approach to his work has in it a level of devotion that really isn't matched in my mind. And there's a deep sense of authenticity. He is who he is, a beacon of realness, of being real, and in that sense, a real inspiration. I believe what he carries forth is essential to you, to each of you on your path. So please welcome Riley Brewster.
Thank you, Greer, and thank you, Ms. Porters, for this opportunity. And thank all of you for being here. I'm honored and grateful to be able to share some thoughts about my work with all of you. So I'm 68 years old, and I've given talks about my work at various points. And for a long time, I was able, in the constraints always of the time structure and the attention span, to be able to speak about linkage from the very beginning right up through to where I was at the time of presentation. And then I reached, and I think one reaches in their life, a certain tripping point where the distance and the span of time becomes too broad, too wide, too much. And while I carry everywhere I've been with me, I lose a sense of the compressed context within which work is made. That sense of how much that's not actually present is present for me in my decision making in the studio. How much can I reach for such that it touches where I am now, even if it was, 5 years ago, something like that. And so when I've given talks recently, I've had to adjust my sense of how I can talk meaningfully as if I am right inside of what I'm talking about. Even though its genesis has linkage back in time for what, 43, 44 years now. And so each time I've done this, that frame changes. So I'm showing you now, with one exception, early on in the talk, work from the last really 2 years, 2 or 3 years. Field work. As Greer mentioned, a book was a monograph of recent work was published exactly, well, not exactly, a little over a year ago. I think October a year ago. And I decided to title that monograph Fields. And let me talk just a little bit about that. I moved from Seattle, where I've been teaching from 2000 to 2006, back to my home stomping ground where I grew up, New Haven, where I still live, 17 years ago. And my studio is in Erector Square. I don't know if you know that or not. Any of you play with Erector sets when you were kids? That'll date you. I sure did. Next to Lincoln Logs, Erector sets were pretty much the done thing. And my studio is in a place in Fairhaven, just on the other side of the border from New Haven, called Erector Square. And it's the old Gilbert Toy Company. And they made their name with Erector sets. And then they got bought out by a West Coast company that moved them to the West Coast. And Erector Square, which was built in the 20s, I believe, it's an enormous construction of factory for toys. Anyhow, that's where my studio is. And in not too far from my studio was the studio of a former teacher of mine, a very, very important person in my life, named William Bailey, known affectionately as Bill. And soon after I moved back, Bill came and knocked on my studio and just kind of wanted to welcome me. And we sat and had something up on the wall, something I'm sure it was in progress. And Bill turned to me and said, "So, what's your question?" And I said, the field. That's my question. And he said, no, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. And Bill wanted me to talk about, something larger, something perhaps philosophical, something about an idea, something about a conception, something about a worldview. Nothing so concrete as, for a painter, the field. And we didn't get very far with this. And then I've, of course, as one does in a conversation with the person that you care about, I've carried that and questioned and pondered it. Certainly did right afterwards for a while. And I realized, well, Bill, that really is my question. The field. And it's where all those other things are in play. The field is the binder The field is the encompassing space, energy, being that holds and gathers everything else inside of it. It's the thing that things emerge out of and back into, return to, and project out from. And that's never ended. It's still the place of the unnameable, the almost unspeakable in terms of spirit, but absolutely manifest. Sequencing is difficult. No, I want to go back. So I'm going to stop that there, and I'll get back to it. But this is a shot from an exhibition that I was in, along with Sarah Stewart, who's in the audience tonight, and her painting on the right and my painting on the left. It was a painting. It was an exhibition curated by Matt Murphy, who edited my book, my monograph. He's a wonderful painter, lives in Boston, and this is at Boston University Art Galleries. And it was called Field Visions. And Matt curated that exhibition with, I can't remember how many it was. I think it was 12, 10 or 12 painters. They all happened to be painters. And it was from June until the middle of September, which is really wonderful, long expanse of time. And so I'm milking the stone for all it's worth. So there's a monograph called Fields, and then Field Visions, and then, well, field work. So that's the title I'm giving to this presentation. One of the things I want to do is show, you will see a kind of a photographic reproduction of my work tonight. And that's of a particular order of presentation. And then there are some shots in the studio, and then there's gallery work with gallery lighting. All of those different contexts. You can take the same image, and we were looking through a few of these, Greer and I and Sarah, earlier, and Greer was saying, "Oh, that's a painting in the show." And I said, "No, but this is the painting you thought it was." And Greer said, "No, that's not the painting in the show." And so the whole question of living in the age of reproduction is a fraught one and a terribly crucial and important one for us to have as makers. We all know our relationship to the individual made haptic object, the handmade. And yet we so often are asked to encounter the world with our work about as far away from that reality as we can get. And we have decisions to make about how we are going to negotiate those different realities and how our work is going to negotiate those different realities. That's a question. Okay. I could stay right here for about another, no, never mind. Shoot. What did I do? Oh, there we go. Never mind. Okay. This is that same painting. It's 27.5 vertical by 27 inches. Worked on for inside of a year. Oil on linen, rabbit skin glue, and lead ground, and built up and scraped down and built up and scraped down over a long period of time. How to talk about the work without justification, without misnaming, without wrong kinds of explanation is a very difficult thing. Let's see what happens if I show more work. If work doesn't start to feel like it might be making work, and work is, the context is the meaning of the work as it's in relationship to other work. So let's see what happens as that starts to accumulate. Oh, yeah. So there are 4 paintings of mine in the exhibition in Boston. I'm showing you a reproduction of each of them. Same size, same material. And the title of this is Earth is Earth. Small painting, 15 inches by 15 inches. Has a fancy French title, Nostalgie de la Boue, Longing for the Mud. And that same painting is on the right, and the last painting of mine is the one on the left. I couldn't get a reproduction from the gallery because the lighting on that painting, the one on the left, the green one, was challenging. So this is back in the studio. Yeah. And now I'm jumping back. This is that little pocket of space that goes back in time quite far, 1980. First semester of graduate school at Yale. Greer was in his second year. I was coming in as for the first year. These are 2 drawings that I've had up on my wall for a long time in my studio, and I had to get them framed because, as you can see, they were drawn on white paper, and I think just on newsprint. And you know what happens with unsized raw paper over time. Doesn't even need to be in the sun. It just starts, doing its thing. So the drawing on the left is a memory drawing of a very specific space that I grew up in. I know the name of those trees. One is a cedar of Lebanon, and the other is a pine tree. And I kind of know, or 40 years later, where everything is, what everything is. It's a notational drawing. All the marks and all the forms are notations of places, events, gestures. And if you look at it pretty closely, the pencil never came off the page. So it was kind of all conjured at once. It was maybe a 6-minute drawing. And the drawing on the right is done from observation, actually sitting in a space that was about maybe 30 yards from the space of the drawing on the left. But I was actually there for this drawing. And it's a home that I grew up in the summers. Yeah. The drawing on the left is 30 yards in a different direction from that first drawing. And the reason I'm showing you those three drawings particularly, is that at some essential level, beyond location, beyond the name of the image, they share a structural imperative, which is they're framing a deep space. And that question of being in relationship to the otherness of an other space than the one that you're in has never left me. The drawing on the right is from about maybe 2 months ago. And it is still concerned with configuring that sense of place, both in the world and on the page inside of the rectangle. It's graphite and then ink. And the thing that's spilling out of the ink is, what is it called? Gum arabic. It's freezing the pigment at the mark and then starting to spill out, bleed out onto the page. Okay. And now paintings. This is a painting which is, it's vertical. It's hard looking at it from this direction. 23 3/4 by 24 inches, or 24 by 23 3/4 inches. I can't remember if this is vertical or horizontal, but I think it's vertical. You saw a couple of the first paintings that were very opaque. First slides that I showed you, very opaque, quite heavily built, added and added and added it as in terms of their process, an additive process. And this was the beginning of a period of works where I had a hunger for a kind of luminosity, if not lyricism, a kind of breathing that would still hold still have stability and still have weight to it. And that was a question. And that drove the process, and that discovered the form of the paintings. This is a larger painting, obviously, I think, in relation to the last painting. This is 30.5 inches by 30 inches. These also have something else new to them, which is they are paintings on linen, oil on linen on panel. So there is a rock hard, resistant plane that I'm pushing against, and it's pushing back. And it's very new. And I'm still painting on those. They also weigh a hell of a lot. And that may have been a reason why I wanted, at least initially, to get some light and air in them, and transparency, because it's such an obdurate object. at another level. So same size. If those were vertical, this is, it's just by 1/2 inch, but it really matters to me. I hardly ever paint on squares. I want to play close to symmetry, but shift the sense of center off of the center. I want to feel that increment of change, of difference off of square can matter tremendously. In some paintings, it's really central. In others, it's like, well, the next slide is, I had this painting photographed and then took it back in the studio and realized I had to keep on working on it. It's the same painting. The only thing that's been painted on since the first one is the field. And its tenor, its voice, it's gone from what I think of. See if I can do this right. Yes, from a very cold umber to a little bit warmer. And there have been, yes, there have been some shifts in terms of what might be called the drawing. The drawing marks, by the way, often in these, are made by scratching with my fingernail through the layers of paint and getting down to the white lead, which is incredibly luminous. And that's where my high values come from underneath instead of on top. These are all the same size, 30 by 30.5. Obviously, not all of these paintings are in the exhibition, and I'm not giving you their names as we're looking at them because I don't name my paintings until they have to go out. And often a show has been hung and everything is unnamed, and I have to sit with journals and find titles for them. But since some of these didn't go into the show, they're as yet untitled. But they all came up together. So I think you can probably start to feel a residual sense of repetition of a kind, of a structure. For instance, frontality. Ways of thinking about the center of the rectangle, the container, as a receptacle of a deep space, or the off-center as a frame within a frame for a deep space. Um, this is a painting that I kind of sweated out whether to put in or not because it's an outlier in terms of its chromatic saturation of any other painting that I'm showing you. It's a painting, though, that I have longed to do, mostly in terms of that color light. I wanted to make a painting really of blue that could be inhabited, that could be spatial, and blue that could feel like body, substance, and not air and water by association, but have a sense of fullness and weight, gravity. This is about 30 inches wide by 37.5 inches tall. If any of you have questions as I'm going through this, please sing out. I believe that this painting begins another series of paintings. And by that, I mean that my process of, well, I used to build my stretchers. I don't do that anymore. But of preparing my stretchers it takes time. So I'll make or have made for me 15, 16 stretchers at a time or so. Often, like, let's say if it's 15, it'll be 5 paintings times 3, but each of those 5 paintings will be the same size. So we just looked at a series of 30 by 30.5. Before that, we looked at some 20, no, not yet. We'll get there. 27 by 27.25. And these are 23 and 3/4 by 24 inches. This could be terribly dull stuff for people that don't live inside of rectangles, but they're meat and potatoes for those that do. So this is a motif that I began when I was rather lost. I'm a New England kid, and when I was in my early 40s, I moved out to Seattle to teach at the University of Washington. And I wrote at that time that New England is what I know. A way to understand is to leave and to find what remains and what you carry, or what I carry. And I think of these as this motif, this structure, as being about the ocean, framing the ocean from a piece of land. And that was a long time ago, or it feels like a long time ago, and I'm still making these paintings, returning to them. I prefer to look up there than down here, because I can't see down here. Okay. These are still all oil on linen on panel. This is a painting that I have sort of revealed the process of all the other paintings and left it at that stage. It's really, okay, so there's a lead ground, and then there's an initial wash color, And I always need some guiding principle about a thought of where I wish to get to in the painting, mostly in terms of color, light, space, voice. And so I start with washes, quite thin washes, that are in every color property respect, value, temperature, viscosity, saturation, the opposite of where I want to get to, so that I can build towards it. And I thought this was going to go up to a gray, warm space. And so I got to this fairly initial ground and started my drawing with my fingernail. And then I made 4 notational marks with a brush. And I thought, well, that's the beginning. And I couldn't possibly have known it while I was working on the painting. It was the end. Something, a way of seeing, a way of experiencing, not the act of painting, but the world of this painting, or a painting world, felt really important to hold on to and not in any way dress up. It feels very raw to me, but it also feels very full. The other thing, which is, the question of when do you know when a painting is finished? And an essential aspect of that for me is scale. When a painting starts to transcend its measurable size and becomes something other than that, it releases itself both inside and out from its concrete, measurable, actual, rational beingness and becomes something else than that. Then I have to catch that and acknowledge it. And then what happens then is, another way of putting that is, when you start a painting, all the will is yours, and the painting is simply a receptacle of what you bring to it. It just receives what you bring to it. It's inert. And we start working, and slowly a transference starts to happen, where we start to empty out and the will of the painting starts to exert itself. And by the end, all the will, all the demand of what it needs is in the painting. And it will tell you. It does speak. And we have to listen. That's our job. So. This is a year and a half ago, or a year ago, inside of there. This is the painting that was on the announcement for the exhibition. And because of that, of course, it has a name. Greer insisted. No, I'm kidding. Eos was the Greek goddess of, I have to be careful when I say this, of morning, meaning dawn. Just a little sidelight. I always had a misunderstanding of mourning doves. And I finally asked someone, how do you spell that? I always thought it was MORN, you know. And they said, no, 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 no. Listen to the sound of a mourning dove. It's the other kind of mourning. So this is the other kind of mourning from that. Okay. And then in parentheses, crow. The figuration, the totemic sound for me of a crow is something that feels like it's been with me my whole life since I was a child. Wherever I've gone, of course, at least in our neck of the woods, there are crows. And yeah, I'm almost tempted to say it's my familiar, but yeah. Greer, I haven't checked the time for a long time. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit faster. Okay. Thank you, Jesus. This is one of the large paintings in the show. 57 and a half inches by 62 inches. And anybody here speak Gaelic or Irish? Okay, so I'm not going to try to pronounce the word. It's the Gaelic word for wind, Sidhe. And it's named after or for an old dear colleague and friend of mine from the University of Washington, Helen O'Toole, from County Mayo in Ireland. And she's still out in Seattle. And she grew up on that other side of the ocean, west coast of Ireland. And so this painting is to honor her. A drawing, very simple, a drawing. Reed pen and ink, bamboo pen and ink. Graphite, reed pen and ink. Open fibered paper. So again, it's bleeding. It's receiving. Instead of the previous drawing where it sits on top of a closed coat surface. Lots of stuff. Ink on the front, ink on the back, washing through, crayon. Yeah. Silver ink, kind of wonderful thing to find. I didn't know it existed. I found it in the store. So my most recent painting, 38 and a half inches by 40 inches. No, 38 and a half inches by 40 and a half inches, just an inch off. I'm going to go kind of fast. a couple of etchings. If you're interested, it's the same plate. Different inking, different ink, different wiping, different paper. Changed everything in terms of voice. And now I'm going to end up where we began, basically back in my studio. The three of the four paintings that were up in the Boston show. Bingo. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
I know at the beginning you talked about how like memory inspires a lot of your work,
Mhm.
and I was wondering if memory inspired this and this series, and if so, like what memory?
So, it's never ended for me. Uh, but it's shifted what it means. It's shifted and changed. One of the things that I would say is that for a very long time, for us as makers, whatever our medium is, uh, there has been a period of time where our deepest memories and our deepest experiences in the world are out in the world. And that's where we go when we conjure and think about memory in terms of its place, its location, its genesis, where it comes from. But there comes a tripping point where we realize we've been living more time in our studio with painting than anything outside of it. And painting memory starts to become a location, a place to draw upon. In terms of that well of, I mean, it's the great thing about, well, for me, painting, it could be, I think, probably any form that you are engaged with, but we get to have a record of that, which is astonishing. But actually, what starts to feel astonishing is that not everyone has that, because we get so used to that being a fact. And so that shifts an understanding, so that I think what for me in my recent work constitutes the voice of memory are not things, not images as such, not surface description of things, not even sort of walkable spaces, but a way of getting being back in relationship to that space through properties of light, properties of materiality, properties of and then how those things become climate, become time of year, become time of day, more interested in the totality than the parts, but always having to find the two, negotiating between them. Does this help at all? Okay. Yeah. Other question?
What's the significance of the line in every painting?
The line, the vertical one?
Yes.
Okay. Um, really, it functions as both a thing and a division, as if there is possibly two different realms of space on one side and the other side of it. It's also a way of holding, in a way that, in terms of a place inside of the field of vision, frankly, in my mind, something like a tree might be like that. I'm reminded a little bit about the opening stage directions to Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, which is evening, a country road, a bare tree. And don't know what else to say, except also it just feels like, so, you can do that thing of looking at a work in order to ask the question, what is something and why is it there, is take it out, and I need that beast up there. The painting needs that being up there. Yeah. I mean, there is the other thing that I could speak about as essential, but even perhaps unpack it a little bit more, is the repetition and return in all the work of that notation of the horizontal mark. And it's the vestige, it's the remainder of vanishing point, eye level, horizon line. And what it matters to that is that it feels refound every time in terms of its location in relationship to everything else, and then everything else in relationship to it. But it is that still point that, for one thing, as those kind of perspective ideas will do, is its very purpose is to tell us as the viewer where we are in relation to the painting. That's what perspective is. It tells us where we are in relationship to what we're looking at. That's what's meant by eye level. Yeah. Another question? Yes.
Do you find a separation between each of the layers, or do you kind of perceive them all as one thing? And then if you kind of separate them, do you feel any sort of affection towards each layer as it kind of like moves farther back in the work?
Sure. I've often felt loss when I paint over or start to eradicate what was underneath. But something compelled me to say that's the only way. Sometimes paintings have a memory of wherever they've been. And I love it when that happens, but that's not always the case. And I think it was wanting to see if I could make some paintings which only have one or two layers instead of like many, many, many others. where I began those few, and there are only a few of them, those very transparent paintings, to find out if I could live with that. And so, yeah, to say yes to something is to say no to many, 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 many other things. And there's always a risk of loss. And we don't know if the gift on the other side of the found is going to happen. But it's a risk we have to take, I think. Yeah. Last question. Hi.
I just want to know, like, what you meant by field, because, like, are you using it as like a metaphor, or is that like a field, like the grass or the field of art? Like,
Sure, sure, sure.
what are you like? What is that?
I'll be really stupid and say yes. um, it does have many connotations. At one level, it is metaphoric in that it points out as an idea. It points out to another world from the painting. As he said, fields of grass. No, these are fields of paint. So I think it's capable of doing that. But it's also in the nomenclature of what we do, what I do. It's very specific. Figure field, figure ground, ground and field being more or less synonymous with one another. Yeah. So of course the other one is positive, negative. And, as if, especially in drawing, the ostensible objectness are perhaps some individual forms in there. And then there's everything else. And this is rather crucial to me. I want to get to a place in a painting where there are not separations. I have no planes in my painting because planes often, at least in my mind, denote separations, breaks. And I want everything to make and be made by everything else. And the historical voice that comes into my mind at that point is the man who said, when one person said, you ought to go out and look at nature, and he said, I am nature. That's Hans Hofmann and Jackson Pollock. Pollock's journey and to find a language that would speak of there is no separation. And the fraughtness of it was the energy of it, was the majesty of it. And I'm still searching inside of that question. What does that mean for me? What does it mean to not be separated? That's about as close as I think I'm willing to get to about that unnameable, unspeakable aspect, which is more important than anything else. Absolutely more important. It's what drives, motivates, is that search. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Riley. Thank you for being a good audience, everybody. And there are cookies and punch up in the Gilbert Gallery in the dining hall, so please join us up there.